In this video, we will walk you through the steps to properly test the cluster autoscaler in Amazon EKS. Imagine an e-commerce website running on Amazon EKS experiencing a sudden increase in traffic during a flash sale event. The application needs more computing power to handle the surge in customer requests. With Cluster Autoscaler enabled, new worker nodes are automatically provisioned to support the increased demand, ensuring the application remains responsive. Once the sale ends and traffic decreases, CA removes the extra nodes to reduce costs while maintaining optimal performance. This scenario highlights the importance of properly testing CA to ensure seamless scaling and prevent downtime during high-demand periods. Before we begin, let's go over the prerequisites needed for this process. First, ensure you have a running AWS EKS cluster. Here, we create a cluster named Boutique Cluster, and set up the necessary node groups. Next, check the number of nodes in your cluster before scaling. This helps in verifying the changes made by the Cluster Autoscaler. Ensure that the Amazon EKS cluster policy is attached to the IAM role for your EKS cluster. This policy is crucial for the Cluster Autoscaler to function properly. Similarly, ensure that the necessary policies are attached to the IAM role for your worker nodes. These policies allow the nodes to interact with the EKS cluster and scale as needed. Deploy an application on your AWS EKS cluster. This application will be used to test the Cluster Autoscaler. Verify that all services within your application are running smoothly. This ensures that the environment is ready for testing the Cluster Autoscaler. Here is the interface of our e-commerce application. We will use this application to simulate traffic spikes and test the Cluster Autoscaler. Now, let's dive into the steps to test the Cluster Autoscaler. First, ensure that your node group is configured to support autoscaling. This involves setting the appropriate parameters for the node group. Next, create an IAM policy specifically for the Cluster Autoscaler. This policy grants the necessary permissions for autoscaling operations. Attach the newly created IAM policy to your EKS node IAM role. This step is essential for enabling the Cluster Autoscaler to manage node scaling. Deploy the Cluster Autoscaler to your EKS cluster. This involves applying the necessary configurations and ensuring the autoscaler is active. Verify that the Cluster Autoscaler is running by checking the status of the autoscaler pods in your cluster. Test the Cluster Autoscaler by scaling up a deployment. Increase the number of replicas and observe how the autoscaler provisions new nodes to handle the load. Monitor the Cluster Autoscaler logs to check if it is detecting unscheduled pods and adding new nodes as needed. Once scaling is tested, reduce the replicas to check if the Cluster Autoscaler removes unused nodes. This step ensures that the autoscaler can scale down effectively. Finally, perform a node check to confirm that the cluster has scaled down and the unused nodes have been removed. After completing the project, always clean up unused resources on AWS to avoid unnecessary charges. Here, we see the process of deleting various resources to ensure no unnecessary costs are incurred. This slide shows the detailed steps involved in deleting a cluster, ensuring all resources are properly removed. In summary, we created and attached the required IAM role and policy, deployed the Cluster Autoscaler, tested autoscaling, and verified its functionality. For more detailed steps and information, you can refer to the project file available on Medium.